Sinestro. Hal.
That ending was insane. Lanterns episode 2 has dropped, and I think I might like it more than the pilot. Like I said in my last video, the show is full throttle. Within its roughly hour-long time slot, it manages to fit in so much stuff. Just like last week, I was feeling overwhelmed because there's so many cool things being shown, great revelations, and most importantly, thought-provoking dialogue. I was geeking out because of the references. The best way to start this review is by discussing the ending. Spoilers ahead. In the ending, we see Hal suit up in his Green Lantern suit, which by the way looks beautiful, and he flies away, leaving the motel that John and him were staying at. We then see Hal going to another planet, which is none other than the planet of Oa. He then goes inside the Green Lantern Corps HQ, which has a facility that's holding individuals. Hal finally reaches a prisoner who he wants to see, their holding cell, and enters. It is then revealed that the prisoner is none other than Sinestro. Just to be clear, this is no surprise, because we knew Sinestro was not only in the show, but also being imprisoned. However, it caught me off guard that we were seeing him this early. Like, it's literally only the second episode, and we're already establishing Sinestro, which I think is awesome. It really goes back to my other of how great the pacing is, because it has no filler. It really makes each episode feel much more must-see, which they are. Sinestro is then confronted by Hal. But before we get to that, I want to discuss how Hal getting shot makes the scene of Sinestro so much better. I like how earlier on in the episode, after Hal gets shot and wakes up in the hospital, Sinestro is foreshadowed, as the sheriff told Hal that he was saying Sinestro's name in his sleep. Not only that, but she also was able to access some information about him, which essentially told us why he's imprisoned and give a bit of a context to his relationship with Hal. In that moment, I'm thinking, damn, this is pretty random, but in the back of my mind, I obviously knew that it was planting the seed and would play a part in the bigger picture, which it did. This was great foreshadowing, as later on, in the end of the episode, Hal goes to meet Sinestro, and there Hal attempts to pry information out of Sinestro. However, Sinestro already knew. Simply put, Sinestro said to Hal that he has bigger fish to fry than the Manhunters. Hal's a bit confused, but Sinestro simplified it for him and told Hal that he saw Manhunters as his second biggest threat currently, while his biggest threat is John Stewart. This was a mic drop moment, and honestly pure aura from Sinestro. You might be wondering, how does Blood know about John Stewart? And then Hal fears him. Well, I think that's because the scene from the hospital, in retrospect, demonstrated that the reason why Hal was saying Sinestro's name while asleep was probably due to the fact that he feared something. Even though we're not here yet, it's still important to mention that Sinestro and his Yellow Lantern Corps quite literally represent fear and excel off of that. This is literally being alluded to here. So when Hal is secretly hating on John, it's because he actually fears him as he sees John as a threat, which then tips off Sinestro, due to Sinestro already knowing Hal, and I suppose having a connection with him, which allows him to sense Hal's fear. I'm sure this will be explained more in the next episode and throughout the season, but the ending did its job, which is to establish that Hal officially envies John to the point where he sees him as a threat. What happens when you see someone as a threat, especially in this context, where you have powers and still see your trainee as even more of a danger to you than the actual villains? Well, this most likely means bloodshed. The show has made it clear from its first 2 episodes that Hal has a disdain for John, but we didn't actually know the gravity of it. It could have, and was chalked up to Hal just being a bitter old man. However, we now know that the real reason is much more sinister. Hal doesn't simply envy/dislike John because he's a bitter old man. He sees John as a threat because he's significantly stronger than him, which is why when you look back at these first 2 episodes and re-examine all those instances where it seems that Hal is simply hazing John, the new recruit, it's actually for a much darker, not lighthearted reason. He just doesn't want John to get to his full potential, and his actions back that up. In the beginning of the episode, John is seen trying to fly as Hal is finally teaching him. John can't fly, but he is able to form a construct of a bird, and throughout the runtime, we see John never let go of this bird, which shows how strong he is, as it requires a ton of concentration and a good subconscious, as he kept it going without a ring. I feel like this also shows how John's military background of being a Marine, and the tough mindset that is needed in order to be one, translates into being a Lantern. Even when we see John fighting the aliens, although he lost the fight, he was still holding his own, particularly in the car scene, when he's using the bird and surroundings to his advantage, which demonstrated his well-known high IQ and combat skills, stemming from his time serving as a Marine. Back to the bird, we see Hal acting weird when John constructs it. Like I said, you can easily write it off as Hal being a bitter old man in a stereotypical mentor and protege relationship, but this felt different. The look he had screamed of jealousy, which comes from bad intentions. When going back to the scene after the ending, just like a lot of other things, it's completely recontextualized, because we now know that Hal was acting like this because he feared John. In that moment, Hal realized that John's levels above him in terms of strength, and more generally, as a Green Lantern. Simply put, he views that as a threat. He doesn't want John to take over his place, let alone surpass him. Hal views himself as a special one, being seen as a heroic Green Lantern, savior of the world, and he doesn't want that to change. Even applying this to real life, you have people within your circle who you are super close with that are preying on your downfall. The worst part is, just like most people in real life, John doesn't know this either. I know that John will find out / figure this out eventually, because he's just way too smart not to, but it'll be interesting to see how they go about it. Maybe Sinestro uses this information as leverage in order to manipulate Hal and John in order to get his way, which would probably be escaping from prison, but who knows? All I know is that Sinestro has a sinister reason for all this. He has a bigger plan in the works, and Hal and John are needed for it in some way. I also wonder how the Guardians play into all this, because currently, Hal's relationship slash standing with them is not all that good. Whenever John tells Hal to report something to the Guardians, as he should, as it is protocol, Hal dismisses him. Same with how Hal constantly asks John if he had spoken to the Guardians. Something is fishy and feels wrong. Why is Hal so scared of the Guardians, and why doesn't he want them involved? Well, in typical Hal Jordan fashion, it's probably due to him breaking the code and doing something that he shouldn't be. The bottom line is that Hal and the Guardians are not seeing eye to eye right now. I do find it interesting how John acts when Hal asks him about the bird. Like, why did he choose a bird? Hal is saying that it must mean something significant slash deep to him, because otherwise, he wouldn't have constructed that, nor protected it with his life. The way John tries to shrug it off, while his face says otherwise, makes me think that there is something more to the story. I'm guessing it'll get expanded upon in the John Stewart focused episode, which from my understanding dives deeper into his backstory. Maybe then we'll understand what the bird truly represents slash means to John. If it's anything like the first 5 minutes we saw of John's backstory from when he was younger, then I know it's going to be very dark and probably depressing. Speaking of Sinestro, as I mentioned in my previous Lanterns video, there were 2 huge themes, which were trust and not being afraid, being fearless. I briefly mentioned how this has a connection to Sinestro since he represents fear. He feeds off of it. Fast forward to episode 2, in the ending, it is revealed by Sinestro that Hal views John as a threat. In other words, Hal fears him because Sinestro can sense it. I think I was on the right track because I did say there was way too much of a focus on these 2 themes, particularly not being afraid, fearless, and that this has to be intentional because he wouldn't put all his time and effort into making it a focal point, especially in the first episode, if it wasn't going to be a through line and or significant in the rest of the season. Even when it comes to trust, unlike the first episode, I think it's safe to say that Hal does not trust John as he sees him as a threat and by extension fears him. In a way, compared to the pilot, we are now seeing the themes getting flipped as Hal is afraid, fear, and has trust issues, which as we now know, were probably here this entire time. We just didn't officially find out till now. Regarding the timelines, Episode 2 focuses on the 2016 timeline. This gives us good context for when we go back to the 2026 timeline now, as we have found out a lot more that changes our perception about Hal and even his relationship with John, which could explain John's reaction when he saw Hal dead. I'm very limited in my Resident Evil knowledge, but what I do know is that the town of Rushville is giving me vibes of the towns in Resident Evil where the villagers slash citizens are weird, maybe because they're under control or something. The fact that the town is so adamant on getting Hal and John out of town makes me think that something similar may be going on. I'm not saying that the entire town is full of aliens or anything like that, but maybe they're controlled in some way. Pure speculation, by the way. I have nothing to back this up, just a gut feeling. I'm probably totally wrong, but there's been a clear emphasis on the town not liking Hal and wanting him out. On top of that, the father-in-law, who is super weird and probably an alien slash manhunter, realizing that Hal is onto him, paired with the power he has over the town, I think something is brewing here. There's some sort of connection. The town and its people are off-putting. The sheriff did say that people follow her father-in-law's words, so maybe there's some cult thing going on, where he's actually an alien in disguise, and has townspeople under his control. I don't know. Simply put, the town is shady. When Hal sends off John to retrieve the lantern, John is then kidnapped by aliens who explain to him what Manhunters are, a bit of their backstory with them, why they're bad, and how they need John's help to get the last one, which is in Rushville. These aliens cannot get the last Manhunter because they are banned from entering Rushville. If they enter, the Manhunter will be tipped off, and that'll ruin all their hard work in finding him. These aliens make it clear to John that if he doesn't help them deal with this last Manhunter within 48 hours, they will explode the town. I like this because it sets clear stakes. John now has a clear new motive that requires urgency. They also used a memory device on John to show him the pain that the Manhunters cause to their people, so that John can understand where they're coming from and how dangerous of a threat Manhunters are. John gets back to Rushville and tells Hal all about it, even though he wasn't supposed to, which leads to Hal rushing to Sinestro to get answers. I say all of this because the big mystery right now is a mysterious Manhunter. Who could it be? Based off of pure speculation, and like I said, expect the unexpected of the show, because it could be anyone, but I think an obvious candidate would be the sheriff's father-in-law, as he is so sketchy, especially when you consider his obsession with aliens, such as the access he has to advanced technology to detect aliens that's never been seen before, even by Hal. Hal even thinks that he's hiding stuff on his compound, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, this dude is super sketch. So based on all of that, he has to be a candidate for potentially being a Manhunter. Next up is an unlikely one, which is maybe all the more reason that it could be her. I'm talking about the sheriff. The sheriff is the most normal person in town, but even then she comes off as kind of weird. What made me raise my eyebrow was when she made it clear to Hal that she wasn't on his side, and that she was hiding information, such as fighting over the jurisdiction of Hal, while fully knowing that it was already an extraterrestrial matter. Does that not come off as a Manhunter trying to cover their tracks? Like I said, it's highly unlikely because she seems relatively normal. I would say Hal is a dark horse for being a Manhunter. The reason for why I think it could be him is because the way he views John as a threat, the way his demeanor has changed drastically in the last few years, from 2006 to 2016, it's like he's a whole new person. Lastly, he holds a position of power, which is being a Green Lantern, and as we know, Manhunters have beef with the Guardians and by extension, the Green Lantern Corps, as the Guardians replaced the Manhunters with the Green Lanterns, after realizing that Manhunters were just not it. They lacked empathy, compassion, etc. Pretty much the human touch, which led to them doing insane things. An important detail, which I'll reiterate, is how Hal gets all weird and is adamant about not getting the Guardians involved at all, under any circumstance. It comes off as him hiding something, doing something wrong, when he consistently refuses to report to the Guardians. Maybe the reason he's doing this is because he is a Manhunter himself and doesn't want to blow his cover, as that Manhunters don't really have emotion, so explaining the Manhunter being Hal, fearing John, doesn't make much sense. These are my top 3 candidates. To be honest, I have no clue. Imagine some random character that we saw in the town hall meeting. That'd be diabolical. Jokes aside, it has to be a character that's somewhat relevant to the story. Another character that it could be is the mother-in-law / grandma. Maybe that's why she chose to get close with John, as he is a lantern and she is a Manhunter. I feel an even stronger sentiment than last week regarding the unpredictability of the show. Sinestro showing up this early I did not expect. The revelation of Hal and John, I didn't expect that as well, especially in the manner that is revealed. I didn't expect Hal to be fully suited up by episode 2, because usually superhero shows save that for the end of the season. What I'm trying to say is that, for example, when it comes to the mystery of who is the Manhunter, the show has done such a good job at making me think that it could be anyone. I'm unable to rule out anyone because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, damn, there's a chance I could still be this person. There's no obvious choice. This all stems from the first episode and setting the tone that nothing is off the table, such as killing off one of their main characters, and Hal Jordan. It allows for the seed of doubt to be planted into our head. Till the end of the series, we'll be second guessing and doubting everything. I'm going to be expecting the unexpected at any given moment, and even then, I'll probably still end up being wrong, just due to how unpredictable the writing is, in a good way. The best part is that these unpredictable moves still fit and make sense in relation to the story. They aren't done for the sake of it. They actually add value to the story being told and advance it in some way. Assuming next week is the same, there's going to be even bigger twists that seemingly come out of nowhere that'll probably be larger in scope and scale, as we are now heading out into the cosmos. The way this episode ended, I'm so excited to see more of Hal and Sinestro, whether it's a continuation of the current discussion they're having, which I'm guessing is going to become more heated, or flashbacks / an entire episode dedicated to the tales of Hal and Sinestro back in the day. I'm down for whatever. The few seconds, or maybe it was minutes, that we see of Sinestro reinforces the fact I thought the casting was great. I want to see more of him. I want to see the madness he's going to unleash. Give me the Yellow Lanterns. Also, Sinestro and Hal's relationship is on point right now. They flipped it so that Hal was the protege and Sinestro was the mentor. So the dynamic is different here. Hal's feeling what John does, except in this context, his mentor was Sinestro, who tried to ruin the Green Lanterns, and Hal seeing him after a long time. This lengthy and deep relationship that they had will definitely be utilized in the story in some way. We're already seeing that. There's a lot of richness to it. Hal and Sinestro's relationship is the inverse of Hal and John's relationship and dynamic. I love how Dude was really rage baiting Hal because he knows he can. Wait till Sinestro gets out of these bars. It's gonna be scary. In terms of lore, mythology, and references, there's quite a few that I picked up on that had me freaking out. It got overwhelming because I knew I wasn't going to be able to remember all of them, but from what I do remember, the most significant ones are the Lantern, Pocket Dimension Vault, Oa, and Gotham. For the Lantern, we finally get to see it in a unique way, as Hal sends John on a mission in order to temporarily remove him from Rushville and everything that's going on there by using the Lantern as an excuse. This goes back to how we found out about Hal's true intentions and feelings towards John. Like I said in my last video, the little details are done so well thus far in the show. It really goes a long way. The little details compound. I really enjoyed how there was an emphasis on Hal's ring needing to be recharged and the limits that come with that. It adds to the groundedness of the characters and overall show, as Hal can't just spam his powers constantly in order to deal with any inconvenience. He must actually investigate and find his own way in order to get answers, just like how John has to every day. By doing this, it allows for a slight payoff when John finally retrieves the Lantern and brings it back to Hal in Rushville. Hal charges the ring, and we see the stunningness of it while he does the Green Lantern Oath. There's a good sci-fi element in here when Hal goes to Oa to see Sinestro, and while doing so, we see a bit of what the world looks like in the DCU and how they function. The facility had trippy architecture, I can't lie, and the way the cinematography was done only added to it. The planet shot was stunning, even down to the prison cells glowing one by one. As Hal passes by each of them, adds a nice wrinkle to show the difference between planets. There was a slight feeling of dread and fear that I felt when Hal was in Oa, because it's just dark and gloomy, and when you consider who he's seeing there and why, it only makes it worse. Another sci-fi element was the Pocket Dimension Vault. I like how the DCU is exploring a lot of these with Superman, Peacemaker, and now Lanterns. The Pocket Dimension Vault was trippy. It was so well done. When John put his arm in there while he was looking for the Lantern, I honestly thought some creature was going to grab him. Fortunately, there wasn't a creature in the Pocket Dimension, but there was one in another part of Hal's house. I imagine the Pocket Dimension feeling cold as ice because of how it looked. It looked like debris was floating around. For all I know, it could have been dust. The point being that the Pocket Dimension actually felt realistic. The Gotham reference I expected because of rumors / theories floating around online that stated that the sheriff was originally from Gotham. I know I've been saying it a lot this video, but it does recontextualize her character as you begin to understand why she always seems to be on edge. That's because she's experienced Gotham firsthand, as a citizen that used to live there. Also, that is partly due to her in-laws being weird, but I digress. I'm not going to jump to conclusions and say that Batman is in Lanterns, because that's just simply ridiculous. But I like how they're referencing Gotham here and there in the DCU. Maybe down the line, or maybe even later in the series, we find out more about the sheriff's time in Gotham. I highly doubt that any of this will have any relevance to the actual Brave and the Bold movie, but it's fun to catch and discuss. The great thing about the DCU is that we have all these tonally different places that coexist in the same universe, alongside tonally different characters. Overall, Lanterns continues to be off to a great start thus far, which I'm expecting to carry on for the rest of the season. I literally have no complaints. I'm loving it. The mystery's only becoming even deeper. Anyways, let me know what you think down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next one. Peace.